a financial expert and the chairman of the Board of Trustees, AMAKA Chiwuike Newington Foundation, a foundation geared towards improving the quality of life of people, especially those that are with asthma, allergy, and respiratory diseases. And today we shall be looking at the issue that has put everyone in a situation of uncertainty, and that is no other thing than coronavirus, known as COVID-19. Economy, there's a country that is dependent on oil. A lot of people have asked the question, would the recent oil price slump have any effect on the Nigerian economy? As it stands, we know that oil contributes over 60% of Nigerian revenue and over 90% of Nigeria's foreign exchange. And it's important to state here, given the statistics, that the slump in oil price will have a very big negative impact on the Nigerian economy. First, prior to the slump of the oil price from $57 per barrel to around $11 as it is today, Nigerian government has always predicted its budget benchmarks based on oil. And fortunately or unfortunately, we have never met that benchmark, hence the need to always borrow. And that is why you've seen the public debt of the country rising on a daily basis. So what this tells you is that given the slump in the oil price, the revenue of the country will also drop drastically, which means also that most capital projects, and not just capital projects, even recurrent expenditures, salaries, won't be able to be paid. Government won't have enough resources to pay for those things. And that also means that poverty will be on the increase in Nigeria. Don't forget that Nigeria is already the capital of poverty in the world, with over 95 million persons in extreme poverty, and over 68.8% of these people are food poor. What it means that they are unable to eat daily. And with what is happening, given also that the problem we're already facing by COVID-19, occasioned by the shutdown and lockdown that has made a lot of people more pauperized than they were before the COVID-19. With recent slump in the oil price, what it means is that going forward, a lot of people will experience more hardships that will mean them being unable to meet their daily needs. What are the implications for this on families, on subnational government? When I say subnational government, I mean the local government and the state government. You recall that most state governments derive their own share of revenue from what they call the federation account, and what I call sharing of money. What it means that if the national income is affected as a result of the slump in oil price and COVID-19, what it means that most states won't be able to pay their staff salary and meet all their obligations. We saw what happened in 2015 when we had just a slight drop in oil price. Most states went to federal government to ask for bailout. So what it means also is that going forward after COVID-19, even as we are battling COVID-19, they would be unable to meet the obligations. For families, we also recall that most businesses depend on government budget. That is why in Nigeria, before budgets are ready, every business are as though they're on a law. So what it means also is that we may experience a heightened insecurity occasioned by poverty and a lot of people losing their jobs, because what it means is that a lot of people will lose their job forthwith. But are we losing hopes? No. There are things that can be done. What it means that currently we all need to begin to think without the boss. You know, the ASEAN has been think outside the box, but for me now there is no boss to think with. So it means that we need to think without the box. And what it means is that for those who have always depended on white-collar jobs, those who have always depended on one source of income, the need for diversification has arisen, not just for government, but for individuals. So we need to begin to think on those we can do. Why growing up in our village, every family has what they call a little farm near the houses. Those farms are where we produce the things you use to feed you. But recently, we found out that we have jettisoned all those things. So this is the time to go back to agriculture for at least personal consumption before we talk about selling out to other people. So we need to begin to make right investments in industries, manufacturing, service sector, knowledge. Actually, most economies are driven by knowledge. And in Nigeria as at date, yes, we have a lot of graduates that are able, because there's a disconnect between the industries and the universities. So we go to universities and we are taught those things that are not impacting on the industry. Hence, the need for most companies in Nigeria going abroad to bring people to work for them. So there's need also to begin to develop our curriculum to meet the needs of industries. We have a lot of universities in Nigeria that are not impacting the environment, and that needs to change going forward. At state level, it is important that even while we are fighting COVID-19, that the government begins to make the right investments. And even as we are fighting this, the money that they've approved and released for COVID-19, I have state government releasing 550 million, federal government releasing billions of naira. My advice is that yes, palliatives are good, but what happens after COVID-19? That is where the real problem starts. So it's important that we begin to plan for the rainy day, even though the rain has already started. So I will encourage states to begin to put necessary measures in place. First, you have a lot of states have SME centers that cannot support businesses. That needs to change. We can develop industrial clusters where we provide all the infrastructure that are needed to ensure that new businesses start, and even those existing businesses have the right environment to thrive and prosper. Without that, most states will go insolvent. What it means is that they will go bankrupt. The same thing for Nigeria as a country. If we don't take time, we'll go bankrupt. Growth already is going on a receding basis. And over time, we'll go into depression, recession, depression, and obviously bankrupt. And when that happens, I hope our case will not be like that of the Venezuela. Over the years, we've made so much money from oil that went into private pockets. And that has not stopped even as we are going through this problem. That needs to change. We have also seen the federal government claim to be distributing money and palliatives to people. And recently, the Minister for Humanitarian Affairs said that the basis for distributing this will be for those who recharge minimum of 100 naira per month or thereabout, and those with a bank balance of 5,000 naira. Now, the big question is that how do you determine the poor? That one recharge 100 naira in a month or have 5,000 balance does not make the person poor or rich. They are international standard, and that has not been followed. So even if you want to follow, somebody may not be recharging his line, or when he recharges, it could be somebody that recharges. In Nigeria, we are used to begging, rentier system. So some people may have their line recharged, and eventually they don't have the funds. And those whom you see big money in their accounts may not be owners of those funds in this era of corruption. So those whom you may term to be rich might not be rich. And more so, those that are vulnerable are those who are potentially vulnerable to joining into poverty level. So you might see somebody whom you think that is rich, but is evidently, with the things around him, for any little slip, the person goes back to poverty. So it's important also. I was shocked recently when the federal government said that those that have been given the conditional cash transfer are those who they've been giving them money in the last 4 years. So the big question is, if you are giving this money to end poverty, So what it means is that the over 5 years that we've been giving out this money, we've not been able to end poverty. So also that requires a huge rethinking, because you can't be doing something the same way without achieving results and you keep doing the same thing. So for me, instead of giving people handouts as a basis to ending poverty, the government should make investment, the right investment. I said this recently also when I wrote an article, that instead of sharing money and say you are getting people to sweep the roads and give them money from now to December and afterwards they go back to poverty or hunger, why don't you use those monies to establish cottage industries where you will employ these people in a productive venture and they will be earning salaries in a sustainable basis while also increasing the revenue of the government and also contributing to the development and growth of the economy. That is the best way to go. This day, it shows lack of capacity when government begin to use ad hoc and interventionist approaches to deal with structural and fundamental problems. We need to go back to the drawing board to begin to look at what the problems are and profile long-term sustainable solutions to deal with issues. The idea of any little thing will do kata kata kata, have a good approach, and it looks as though you solved it. Now, let me say this. You may have cancer, and most times you will be having headache. If you take Panadol to deal with headache, what it does that is it reduces the pains from headache. But the real problem is cancer. Nigeria need to determine or discover what our real problems are and begin to deal with those problems instead of solving symptoms without solving the problem. Most importantly, the 3.6 million households that the president has approved as those that are eligible to receive the CCT, that is conditional cash transfer and other palliatives, is like a drop in the ocean. You recall when I spoke earlier on, we have about 95 million persons that are in extreme poverty in Nigeria. So you can imagine what 3.6 million persons, the percentage is less than 0.00001%. So that also gives credence to my earlier lesson that it doesn't make sense, real sense. It may solve little, but it's like a drop in the ocean to begin to share money. What we need is to begin to build necessary infrastructures that will enable people to do the right things and get themselves out of poverty. Is about the southeast and subnational level, the states. I've mentioned earlier, most of the states in Nigeria are not able to pay salaries alone from their internally generated revenue. Most of them depend on the federal level, with the exception of Lagos and maybe Port Harcourt. Every state cannot survive without the federation, the money that is coming from the federation accounts. So what is the implication? The implication is that given the dwindling oil revenue, most states will shut down, practically shut down, except will begin to do the right things. And that is why I commend the Abia State government recently has set up the Economic Advisory Committee, post-COVID-19 International Advisory Committee, that will help them to re-engineer the economy of Abia State to ensure that the state does not go down after COVID-19. The Southeast economy is not doing so well. When I say Southeast, I mean Anambra, Abia, Enugu, Imo, and this thing. Poverty rate in the Southeast has been on the increase as well. Even though when you do comparatively other states, it will appear that we are doing well. But most times it's always important to compete on your own. When we compete among ourselves, we find out that from where we are previously and where we are currently, we are going down. Educationally, we are going down. But most painfully is that among all the 36 states and Abuja city in Nigeria, the business environment in the Southeast is the harshest, if there's anyone like that, is the most unfriendly to businesses. And that is why you may see that most corporations, more businesses go to Ugo, Lagos, and all the rest of it. The regulatory framework in the Southeast is so poor. The infrastructure and utilities are so poor. The business support development is so poor. So it's important that the government of the Southeast begins to deal with those challenges facing businesses in the Southeast. Recently, some government begin to shut down or knock down kiosks and all those things without providing alternatives. Naturally, I would have expected those governments to build up a place. It could be, for instance, in Enugu, where you have earlier on, Emene East was designated to be an industrial layout. But currently, we see that houses, residences are sprung up that, which is not correct. What I thought the state government would have done would be to build up the infrastructures needed by the building roads, putting lights and all that, so that businesses can go there, industry can go there and begin. And you know, as those big industries start, the small businesses will also begin to supply them the inputs that they require to grow. But that is not happening. So it's important that that begins to happen also if the economy of the Southeast must grow. For instance, Enugu is such a place, could be a beehive of tourists, because Enugu has a lot of tourist sites that has not been, tapped in. The government has been more interested in politics and all the rest of it. You saw Nike Lake, you saw the caves and all the rest of it. What is the state government doing to assess these potentials and begin to earn revenue from those areas? So it's also important that as we think post-COVID-19, that the state government begin to think how to utilize the natural resources that God has given to all of them to begin to earn revenue. And that needs to start happening urgently without further delay. Our allocation is also dwindling. Recently, as of last week, they shared 700 and something billion naira. That's amongst the states and all that, which is a drop, and it will keep drawing. And you recall also that recently the government withdrew 150 million US dollars from the sovereign wealth fund. It's only in Nigeria that we don't invest. And let me say it here, so savings is not investment. And now we keep spending the ones we've saved. What it means after now, what happens if you've depleted all the money you said you saved because of COVID-19 and you are not investing? Post-COVID-19, when your revenue has dropped, you are not having revenues, your IGR is even. In fact, your IGR will also drop for those states that are having high IGR. And the IGR will stop because most businesses have gone comatose as a result of the collapse, as a result of COVID-19. And it takes a lot of time for businesses to start growing again. So what it means is that the IGR of most states will also decrease because they won't be getting taxes, revenues, and others from people. Most people will lose their job as well. So also payee will also reduce. So the state governments and the national government needs to begin to think without the boss to ensure that the economy is restarted. I gave an illustration recently when people say that the COVID-19 has leveled everybody. Yes, it has leveled everybody. When NEPA takes light, everybody goes into darkness. But for those who have money, they can easily buy diesel or fuel to use the generator. The question is that at the national or subnational level, do we have the diesel and petrol to start generator that will give us light? The answer is no for now. So it's important that we begin to buy those things. And there's no better time to begin to buy those resources that we need to restart the economy than now. Don't wait. Don't say we are fighting COVID and you go to sleep. Begin to make the right investments. It's important that needs to happen. And finally, as we work to ensure that the COVID-19 does not escalate, it's important that the state government begin also, at the national level, state government begin to increase contact tracing. It's not enough to say, you can see that across the world, Nigeria will have, as at this morning, will have about 1,095 cases in this country. If we check the testing that has been done, it's also less than 0.0000 point something percent. So we've not even done up to 1% of what should be done. So what it tells you that the number we're having as confirmed cases is far below what the number should have been. So a lot of people are suffering from COVID, coronavirus, without knowing. And I'm sure a lot of people may have died also without knowing, people without knowing they died from coronavirus. So that needs to happen. So the sensitization needs to increase. Secondly, it's also important to also deploy, make use of the normal traditional approaches to information dissemination, which includes the traditional rulers, the churches. Unfortunately, the churches have been closed, which I consider not too good, even though it helps us to practice social distancing. But we should also allow the church to disseminate this information. There are a lot of NGOs that has the capacity to disseminate information, sensitize people. They should also be included in this thing. The government should also fumigate streets and communities, because since you've shut the whole place, people are all inside and in community areas. Those areas need to be fumigated and disinfected to reduce the spread of the virus. There's something I've been observing which is also not too right. Some state governments have shared food items to people as part of palliatives. But their approach also does not encourage social distancing. You share it, you call people in the community, everybody gather. So when they gather, have we achieved the social distancing? No, we have not. During elections, these politicians know how to go to people house to house. Why don't we deploy the same approach to deliver these goods to people who need them? I think that needs to begin to happen. We need to create messages in local dialects and all that too. Tell people, a lot of people don't even believe that coronavirus is real. But it's real, so we need to do that to sensitize people. And I expect the state governments, governor in question, the local government chairman in question, to begin to address people, maybe on a weekly basis, to give them hope. Obviously, people are losing hope. And I'm sure in no distance time, people may decide to revolt against the orders of the state government to start home. And that wouldn't be too good, because definitely it will create chaos in the system. So we need to preach that message of hope. Tell people, yes, coronavirus is real. I know everybody's suffering, but we'll get this thing lifted soon and all the rest of that. Talk to them. It depends on the approach utilized. If you talk to them by giving them hope, I'm sure everybody will understand. Nobody wants to die. Yes, even though we swear I'll die today, but nobody really wants to die. So give them those messages that will enable them, give them comfort, give them hope. And also, while we are doing that, let also distribute some palliatives. It's important that they receive palliatives. Give them food items. For those associations that are membership organizations, you can also give them money. You can give them 2,000. Send it directly into their bank accounts. With that also, it will enable us to also engender transparency and accountability after all this whole thing. And the money that has been released by state government is also important that these monies are accounted for. The era of padding and inflation of prices needs to end. And there's no better time for those to end than now. For every one of us, I'm encouraging us, even as we are going through this trauma, this problem, to know that God, whom we serve, is alive to deal and to get us out of this. And for those who are rich, don't wait until the government gives to those who are around you. We encourage you to give to those who are around you. Let them also feel, because the issue is that if the poor can't sleep, what it means also that the rich can't sleep. So give to them as well. And we also encourage people finally also to begin to think on the things you can do, not just to help yourself, but to help the community. Because together, we will defeat COVID-19 and will become great again. Thank you. I am Dr. Chiwuike Uba, a development economist, a financial expert, and the chairman, board of trustees, AMAKA Chiwuike Uba, a foundation established in memory of AMAKA Chiwuike Uba, who died from asthma crisis in July 4, 2016. The foundation is geared towards the improvement of the quality of life of people, especially those with asthma, allergy, and respiratory diseases. And by the grace of God, we've been doing so much to also better the lives